Hello and welcome to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust is the best way for you to exit highly appreciated cryptocurrency businesses, real estate, so you can defer millions of capital gains tax and create and preserve more wealth. Hey, I'm your host, Brett Swarts, and each episode I'm joined by some of the best real estate, financial, wealth, and crypto minds in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration. So together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. We're also streaming on expert CRE secrets as well. So excited to have everyone join us from there. And I'm super pumped about our next guest. He's out of the great city of San Diego, arguably the best city in the world, California. And he's a purposeful commercial real estate operator and investor who has participated in a diverse set of investment vehicles within the industry. His family and network of investors have owned and significantly increased the worth of several large manufactured housing communities over the past 25 years. And he leads the deal sourcing and acquisition side of Symphony Capital Group and so much more. Please welcome to the show with me, Keith Meyer. Keith, how you doing?
Doing great, Brad. How about yourself?
Hey, I'm doing very, very well. Excited to have you on the show. And for our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give them a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, currently lucky enough to be living out here in sunny San Diego, California, originally from the Midwest. So spent about the first half of my life out there. Came up through engineering background. So worked through the corporate structure and been transitioning more into full-time commercial real estate, but using a lot of my engineering and analytical skills, obviously, in vetting deals and getting into investments and ultimately syndication operations over the last couple of years.
Fantastic. And by the way, if you guys want to learn more about Keith Meyer, you can go to symphonycapitalgroup.com. That's symphonycapitalgroup.com. You're from the great state of Ohio. Cincinnati just lost the Super Bowl.
They
Does
did.
that mean anything to you, or are you just like the Buckeyes forever?
Oh, I was a big bandwagon Bengals fan this year. I've been waiting, 30 years for them to do anything of significance. But I actually went out to Kansas City for the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs and saw it in person with my father. So that was pretty great, and got to double up and check on a recent apartment acquisition that we closed a couple months back there as well. So that was a great trip. But yeah, I wasn't too surprised by the Super Bowl. I'm glad that they put up a good fight and had the lead there in the fourth quarter. It was definitely a fun season.
For sure. That's really cool. Well, let's dive right into the topic at hand, which is win-win partnerships and commercial real estate syndications. So, Keith, what's the number one secret to creating win-win partnerships? And let's start with the sponsors, right? Making sure that they're aligned in leadership, and then we'll move into the investor.
Yeah, I would say it's being deliberate yet flexible, and I'll clarify what I mean by that. But I think that's where my team at Symphony Capital Group has really stood out, is that we have a pretty structured approach for the most part, where we're able to move quickly with newer sponsors that are newer relationships for ourselves. And when you think about how complex and intricate putting together a successful acquisition or sponsorship team looks like, from the deal sourcing, due diligence, closing, and then ultimately property operations aspect, as much of that as you can have pre-planned, pre-templated, put up on rails, so that you can customize and configure on the fly to the extent needed, is really, really critical. So we try to drive that process. And I think that's what really attracts us to a lot of our co-sponsors, is that we have the experience and are kind of on the forefront of being able to tailor those relationships to each unique property and deal structure.
Okay. So talk about your value proposition to like the leadership team and the GP side. And then also, generally speaking, what are the 1, 2, or 3 roles that are involved in these GP deals for commercial real estate syndications?
Yeah, for sure. So, a lot of folks kind of assume that we just jump in at the end on the capital raise side and fill in capital gaps on a deal that's pretty far down the line. That's really not what we're into or what our approach is. We want to develop the relationship up front, even preferably before a deal is even being pursued directly. So pre-LOI phase, while a deal is still listed or still being analyzed. Part of that reason is because we really excel on the underwriting aspect, given the makeup of our team at Symphony Capital Group. So not only on the property level underwriting, but also on the syndication and waterfall structure underwriting as well. So we do a really good job of staying on top of the markets that we pursue in terms of what all those different factors are when you get into rent growth and entry, exit cap rates, LTV with certain regional lenders, all that good stuff. And then ultimately reverse engineering what a competitive return needs to look like to an investor, whether it's an individual or a private equity group, and then reverse engineering what the rest of the returns and the ultimate offer price needs to look like in that regard. So I think based on our experience, we bring a lot of value to some local sponsors who maybe don't necessarily have that level of complexity into the prior deals that they've closed in a given market.
Okay, let's talk about kind of the three, a general ownership of a property. Let's say it's a $10 million deal, keep it simple, and it's an apartment complex. And I've heard a general one framework is a third, a third, a third, a third for the capital raise, like who's bringing in the capital, a third for the general partnership, who's running all the deal, all the operations, all the, the financing, the sourcing, all of it, right? The business side of things. And the third is like a key principal. Is that generally how you guys are structuring ownership and making things equitable?
Yeah, those are some of the larger buckets. We go a little bit more granular than that, and I think that's another thing that helps us stand out is that we really have the true, based on our experience of actually doing it, the true key roles and responsibilities mapped out at a more detailed level. But for the most part, yeah, you're going to be looking at on the acquisition side, compensating for the person that found the deal or fostered the deal to even get to the LOI or best and final phase, PSA phase. And then you're going to need to structure your KP, loan guarantor, person who's putting up at-risk capital like earnest money or inspection fees, things like that, and compensate them accordingly. And then thinking down the road, you need to have a carve out for who's going to be doing the asset management on the GP side. So typically that's the person or persons who are overseeing the local property management team and making sure that the business plans being executed towards making sure that the CapEx budget for renovations is being managed and not overrun, that type of thing. And then another component that we throw in is syndication and investor management. So making sure that you're staying in regular communications with your investors, keeping them updated on the execution of the business plan, answering any questions that come in, and managing that process as well. That's something that gets overlooked because folks are so focused on the acquisition and deal sourcing side these days that sometimes they don't think it far enough down the road, but that's something that we focus on.
Yeah, it makes sense. And so which do you feel like is the role that's maybe most overlooked, right? Or maybe not as appreciated as much, or maybe not as compensated typically? Like any advice there on like someone putting a commercial real estate syndication together?
Yeah, probably would be that back end combination of investor and asset management. So it's tough to find deals that pencil these days. I think there's really a high emphasis on that at present. The actual capital portion, there's a good amount of emphasis, but there's a lot of money out there chasing deals. So probably the ability to act quickly is more critical on the capital portion than even the dollar number at this point. So, if that's going to be a focal area for your team, I'd say that's a way to stand out, is to have that really teed up and able to act quickly under the tight closing timeframes that we're all operating within these days. But for the most part, yeah, it's going to be your syndication, investor management, managing distributions to investors, capital accounts, all that stuff. And then, obviously all the complexities that go into asset management and business plan execution.
Yep. So in the beginning, you mentioned being deliberate and flexible, right? So I imagine you might be getting into some deals where you have these agreements with GPs or sponsors, right, on the deal. Then you get in the deal, and not to anyone's fault, but like, oh my gosh, like this ended up being so much more of an undertaking, or this person ended up being more valuable. So when you say flexible, do you mean like you may be changing some of the percentages on who's getting compensated for what and what that looks like?
Yeah, that's very true. So, you want to come in pretty firm in terms of here's what the full pie looks like, basically, of what needs to be done, and then you have an idea for what each group's specialty is entering a deal, and maybe a group drops out and gets replaced by somebody else in your network, so you need to reconfigure that a little bit as things progress through due diligence and closing. But yeah, typically you have a good, pretty tight range of what those percentages and fee splits are going to look like. But it's really not locked down until pretty close towards towards closing for the most part because of
Yeah,
all
that
the
makes
different
sense.
factors.
That makes sense. And you can learn more about Keith Meyer on symphonycapitalgroup.com. And by the way, we're going to be talking about investors here and how that all connects as well. But I think, everything rises and falls on leadership, right? And so to the extent that your leaders are aligned financially and in values wise and on the same page, and also being deliberate and thoughtful, but also being flexible and realizing that deals can change a bit, right? And things can come up, and having that in place is foundation for good places to invest. So that being said, let's dive into how we make it a win-win for investors. So what are you guys doing to try to make it attractive from an investor standpoint? What's the difference with Symphony Capital Group?
Yeah, we really stay on top of what competitive market returns are, and returns can become complicated when you look at how an investor wants to be compensated over time. We're generally underwriting to 5-year time frames, so if you have a couple dozen investors in a given deal, there's going to be a couple different preferences in terms of how that's ultimately compensated. So as much optionality as you can introduce in that case is generally benefited. So we typically offer something like a preferred return, whether that's a completely separate class that maybe only receives the preferred return because they're more interested in that quasi-guaranteed, predictable coupon payout rate versus somebody that's not looking to take any real cash flow for the first couple of years as a value add plan gets executed, but they're looking for a high ultimate return upon refinance or disposition of the asset. So being able to cater to both of those investor types is something that we certainly focus on. And, my team at Symphony is known as one of the leaders on the forefront of all this tokenization and blockchain for real estate energy that you've heard the last couple of years. I actually spoke at the Blockchain for Real Estate conference in Austin back in September. And that's something that we're really putting a lot of time and energy into, is being able to incorporate that into future deals of having even more liquidity and optionality for our investors in terms of what they're able to do with their percentage of ownership within our deals and our deal structures.
Excellent. Let's talk right about that, because we're really heavy on focus on crypto right now and how it correlates, or how it translates from moving out of crypto tax deferred into real estate deals, passive or actively. We think that's the number one opportunity for those who are in highly appreciated cryptos to get into more some cash flowing producing assets, get some depreciation, but do it in a tax efficient way. So talk about what you guys are doing with the tokenization and blockchain. I'm curious what you mean by that and what that looks like going forward.
Yeah, so there's a few misnomers that we generally try to clear up up front when you talk blockchain versus cryptocurrency versus crypto assets. So real estate, as would be tokenized or is currently being tokenized, is really a crypto asset. It's something that is a taxable event when it's sold or transferred. It's something that's in limited supply. So by definition, that really is an asset versus a currency that's being exchanged on a Forex or something like that. So with that in mind, what blockchain does is you get a lot of benefits on the smart contracts and contract execution. That's probably too long of a topic for these sakes, but that's definitely a big driver and reason why syndicators and investors are interested in gaining those efficiencies. But what it ultimately does is show proof of ownership at a very fractional and very secure level. So, there's a reason that the minimum investment in a lot of larger multifamily syndications is $50,000, now kind of $100,000 is the minimum in a lot of deals. It's because of the amount of effort and administration it goes into taking on each individual investor and managing all those contracts and portals and distributions and things like that. So if you're able to have ownership through what's called an STO, a securitized token offering, fractionalized, much like Bitcoin is or any other crypto asset or cryptocurrency, then you're able to have a lot of that proof of ownership automated and all the associated voting rights and cash distributions automated as well. So that's really where the leaps and bounds of technology that we've seen over the last 5 years or so has come into play to introduce those efficiencies.
Phenomenal. That's really, really fascinating. And I want to talk about crypto and maybe connecting the dots here for everybody who are looking to exit. So we did a couple of deals here recently, Keith, where we helped one client in particular, she bought Bitcoin for 30 to 50,000, and then it went to $50 million. And so she had a huge tax liability. And so she exited 5 million into the trust. She partnered with the trust to start a business venture. And those business ventures can be real estate. Hers happens to be a tech business startup. But just talk about that frustration, maybe even for you as a syndicator, where people want to come to you with capital, but they got to come post tax, right? They got to pay all this 30 to 50% in tax before they show up. What's been your biggest frustration when it comes to people even want to exit crypto or exit any other assets and they have a lot of tax?
Right. So as syndicators, we'd love to take 1031 exchange money all day long. It's generally larger check sizes, and it's folks that are really motivated to get their capital into the replacement assets. But it becomes complicated when you get into all the IRS regulations as far as what's considered a like-kind exchange, and the exchange timeframes as well, with 45 days for identification, then 160 days to execute the replacement. So it's really hard to get all those factors to align when it's already complicated enough to just close on the asset itself. That we are also pioneering as well as on the front of being able to facilitate those both on the entry and on the exit, because we want to cater to those types of investors and take advantage of the tax deferral methods that are out there. You've probably been approached with investors that are proposing things like TICs, tenant in common, DSTs, some of the ways to kind of group together investors or pull investors into deals through tax deferred capital. And that's something that's pretty complicated to structure, but fortunately it's becoming more common to where there's more demonstrated success stories in that regard, and it's becoming a little bit more standardized what that approach is. And I think that's something that, again, being able to introduce some of this fractionalization through securitized token offerings will help as well, just because a lot of the proof of ownership, and it's just a lot more trackable and granular. So just more data available in that regard.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, we call that the shotgun wedding, right? You got to get engaged in 45 days.
Yep.
You got to get it married in 180, and sometimes
not a lot of time.
Not a lot of time, right? Some pressure there. And then sometimes you want to diversify. You don't want to necessarily put all your eggs in just one deal. You want to put a little bit in some liquid investments, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, crypto, some of some passive deals, something inactive, but you don't have to take it all on just your shoulders, right? Or just the timing's not right. And that's where the Deferred Sales Trust is amazing. We call it the Netflix or the Blockbuster 1031, and that you can sell high, buy low, diversify. And it does take some getting used to, and that's part of what we provide with our services. And you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. That's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com, and you can hear all about how we do that. That being said, we're running out of time. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. Knowing what you know now, if you can go back to your 25-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget you'd make sure to tell yourself to do?
Really, it's don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help and ask for referrals. People in this industry are so super helpful. That's one of the things I'm drawn towards. So, if you're looking for something specific, be very aggressive on asking for help, and somebody's going to step up and help you.
Fantastic. Second question: what's the number one book you've recommended or gifted the most in the past year?
Wow. So two that come to mind: Best in Class by Kyle Mitchell and Gary Lipsky, great operational book on asset management. And then I also love Raising Capital for Real Estate by Hunter Thompson. More on the capital management, capital stack, investor management side, and the marketing side as well. Both really helpful.
Fantastic. Question number 3, what are you most curious about right now?
I think it probably is that blockchain and tokenization aspect. That's something that could really revolutionize the industry, and it already is on a smaller level. So we really want to stay on the forefront because it's a win-win situation that benefits both operators and investors alike.
Excellent. What's the number one leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by?
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, I would say. So yeah, again, that ties into the title of this segment that we're talking about here, creating win-win partnerships. That's another thing that I love about commercial real estate. There's enough meat on the bone for everybody to win and have really symbiotic relationships. So that's something that we place a lot of emphasis on up front and make sure that we're managing as we start to build relationships.
Awesome. Last question. After all your success helping people create and preserve more wealth through all the things that you've done with commercial real estate, multifamily investing, and now moving into the blockchain type of future tokenization of real estate. How do you stay centered in your values, and how do you stay encouraged to charge forward to reach new heights?
Really, it's leaning on my close partners, so we keep each other motivated. We operate through the EOS entrepreneurial operating system, so that holds us accountable for what our goals are, making sure that we're looking at short-term, month-to-month, quarter-to-quarter goals, but then also building and staying focused on that 1, 3, 5 year vision as well, and making sure that all the week-to-week grind that we're going through is really tying together to the ultimate vision.
Fantastic. And Keith, for our listeners who want to get to know you or connect with you even more, where can they find you?
Yeah, so we're symphonycapitalgroup.com. We're all over social media. So our Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube channels are pretty easy to find. And then if you'd like to reach out to me directly, I am Keith at symphonycapitalgroup.com is my email.
Awesome, Keith. Thanks for being on the show. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. And we'll talk to you again real soon. I also want to thank our listeners for listening to the episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. As always, we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy. And using a proven tax deferral strategy, such as the Deferred Sales Trust, is the best way for you to exit highly appreciated cryptocurrency, businesses, real estate, save a failed 1031 exchange, exit some GP positions so you can create and preserve more wealth. If you want to learn more about that, go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. I also want to invite you to our crypto mastermind. It's our crypto DST mastermind, that is. We're talking about how to exit crypto and go into real estate, all tax deferred. And also, of course, business owners and real estate owners are welcome to attend and learn about all of this totally free. Okay. It's every Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 1 p.m. Eastern. Go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to join us. Please rate, review, subscribe. Thanks again, the expert CRE Secrets listeners out there as well. We so appreciate you. We will talk to everyone.